What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Xbox Games Showcase that happened just yesterday from the time of this video, highlighting, of course, everything that Xbox has going on, but more importantly, kind of shaping the rest of my year in terms of reviews and release dates and the like. To that end, we've got a lot to talk about, but I always want to mention at the top of these, I am not covering every single thing that was mentioned. In fact, most of what I'm covering is the stuff that is, of course, relevant to the channel itself, and again, what I plan on reviewing for the rest of the year. So, if you'd like to mention anything I do not, by all means, drop it down in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing what people have to say about a few of these for sure. But before we actually dive fully into this showcase, I did want to mention two quick things from the PC gaming show, which happened just after this one because they're not really worth doing an entire separate video for, but were still really important to me. We saw at that show the announcement of an enhanced edition of Neverwinter Nights 2. Very big fan of that. That is one of the CRPGs I have reviewed over the years, and I plan on checking that out when it launches on July 15th. Also at that show, they showed off a trailer for The Altars, another game I've been following, but I've already made videos about that, so you'll hear more about it from me relatively soon as it launches in just a few days. Now, getting back to the thing we're all here for, which is, of course, the actual Xbox stuff, the show opened and ultimately kind of closed with The Outer Worlds 2. This is because, while it was mentioned at the top of the show, they also did a deep dive following the show, and I plan on making a separate video about that so we can go over details and just how some of that stuff is looking, but the Spark Notes is basically that it appears to be Obsidian's largest game to date. They're clearly putting a lot of effort into that and expanding it, and given that they're also charging an $80 price tag for it, I imagine they better. But again, I'll have more to say about that with a separate video entirely. Though, real quick before we move on, it is actually releasing on October 29th, so we have an official release date there as well. But moving on, we have High on Life 2. This was announced and is getting a 2025 release date, so we won't have to wait too long for it. High on Life being a very fun little shooter that was packed full of incredibly crass and raunchy humor. In fact, just as a little side note, the original High on Life is one of two games I have ever had demonetized after covering them on my channel, the other one being Callisto Protocol, actually. So just kind of a funny little anecdote, but either way, even if I don't wind up covering it for that reason, I will absolutely be playing that one for myself at the very least. Following that, we got the announcement of Resonance, a Plague Tale legacy, which is apparently coming in 2026 and presumably related to the Plague Tale series. Now, we don't get a ton of details here. It seems to mostly be cinematic. There seems to be these bright lines connecting everything and a gritty atmosphere full of blood and mystery at the very least, but details on that one are a little skint at the moment. At any rate, we will be learning more about it in 2026, which is apparently its release window. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is actually not a game at all, because we saw the announcement of Xbox Crack at Handheld Gaming, which is in fact the Xbox ROG Ally X, which is going to boast things like basically double the hardware of what is currently in a Steam Deck, better screen, better, everything really, with the added addition that Microsoft Windows has been adjusted and made to run natively on this bit of hardware, which is the especially interesting bit. And while this isn't set to release until later this year, I did want to call it out specifically because, as somebody who covers the Steam Deck in basically every review, this is of note to me. But while this will have, access to the catalog of stuff on like Game Pass and all that with their Everything is an Xbox marketing campaign, what would sell me on this is just, quite frankly, how easy is it going to be to access Steam games on this? With it using Microsoft OS, theoretically you should just be able to download Steam and access them, but there's how something should work and how it actually works. But if I can jump into this and easily access a Steam library, it just seems like a no-brainer purely from a hardware standpoint. Especially since we're not exactly drowning in Steam Deck 2 news. Following on from this, we got a little more information about The Blood of Dawnwalker, the game from Rebel Wolves Studio, some ex-CDPR devs, coming together to make something that is almost, at least aesthetically, very similar to The Witcher, but we play as a sort of half-vampire in an interesting setting. And the cool thing about this is all the gameplay was in-engine and everything, so we got a lot more details on that. Just in terms of what to expect from it. Very cool little trailer. I would say none of it is exactly anything we didn't already know from previous discussions and interviews and stuff, but it is a good look at a work in progress. That game is supposed to be coming in 2026 sometime, so definitely one I'll be reviewing next year. Our next title is a little more fun. Super Meat Boy is seeing a 3D entry. I wanted to mention this one specifically, given that Astrobot won Game of the Year just last year, and this is kind of in that vein, and to be fair, it does look pretty fun. I don't know if it's something I would play or cover personally, but it looks like something I would play with my son at the very least. Either way, coming out in 2026. Our next thing of note was a little more information about Ninja Gaiden 4. Combat here looks appropriately incredible. We see some gameplay, some characters, some classic moves that will surely live up to the Ninja Gaiden legacy. But, on my end at least, this one is releasing on October 21st of this year, so we don't have too much longer to wait for this. My only hang-up personally is that time is going to be busy with a lot of other RPGs, so at least for me, I don't know that I'll get to this one immediately, but it's definitely on my radar for sure. It looks pretty cool. I love a good action game as it stands. Our next little entry after that is the announcement of Indiana Jones' planned story DLC. Indiana Jones wound up being my Game of the Year last year because it is a surprisingly good game. Either way, this story DLC, which will center around the Giants or the Order of the Giants in Rome, so the part of the game everybody liked the most, and that'll be releasing on September 4th. Looking forward to playing through that one. And then the next thing I want to talk about is perhaps the single most bizarre entry of the entire showcase, which is an announcement from none other than Game Freak. And if you're thinking the company that makes Pokemon, yes, the company that makes Pokemon announced Beast of Reincarnation, a post-apocalyptic title taking place in Japan that sees a woman, outcasted for being some sort of source of corruption, fighting off these corrupted forests and growing close to her canine companion as the game presses onward. I'm not entirely sure about how this is going to go or pan out, but I've got to say, compared to all of the Pokemon titles, this game looks incredible, which does make me wonder if they did this just to spite the graphics comparisons on the Pokemon series. Very strange announcement. I'm looking forward to seeing what they've got. That one's also slated for 2026. One of the more enjoyable showcases for me personally, though, was we got to see a little bit more of Clockwork Revolution from In Exile Entertainment. Quite a bit of information about this one. No release date, just to get that out of the way, but they showed off things like the characters, the tone, a little bit of character creation in the form of, choosing a background, your attributes, some mechanical stuff like actually using the time-bending powers we already knew about from previous announcements, but also a little bit about how crafting and customizing guns and things like that will work. And more and more, this game appears to be shaping up as a spiritual successor to Arcanum. Very much so looking forward to this one. At the top of my list of games to cover, for sure. Right after that, we have another sort of surprise announcement in that Obsidian Entertainment, in addition to releasing Avowed as well as The Outer Worlds 2, is actually also going to be putting out Grounded 2 this year as an early access title or an early preview title. And not that far away either, on July 29th, which is just mind-boggling. Obsidian has been a very busy studio here lately. Keeping it moving though, we then got a look at upcoming survival horror title Cronos The New Dawn, which puts you in the role of a time traveler looking to collect the essence of people who died in an apocalypse that happened afterwards, obviously. So the catch there being the more of these people's soul essence you collect, the more haunted you become. In a sort of strange post-apocalyptic meets time-bending adventure. Looks interesting, I'll keep an eye on it. Following on from that, we had some quick announcements about what ESO's got going on in the future, and a couple of smaller games with some neat little gimmicks, but ultimately this led us to a slightly more well-known franchise, which is in fact Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. This is not something I'll likely to play myself, but having such fond memories of it, I would feel bad if I didn't mention it. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 will be coming out with some new areas to explore, new skaters, and it looks like they're doing just some fun stuff there, and I wanted to mention it for nostalgia's sake, if nothing else. They also showed off a bit of the upcoming Gears of War remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, for Gears of War Reloaded. Not super familiar with the Gears of War franchise, I fully admit, but I used to play a little bit of Gears of War with my friends back in high school as they owned it, but I was never super into it personally. Again, more of just a nostalgia mention than anything else. We also got news of a Persona 4 remake that has been rumored for a while, so if Persona is an important series to you, you got some information there. Personally, I've just never gotten around to covering that one much either. But it does bring us to our final entry for this video at least, which is actually Call of Duty of all things. And while I think if you watch my channel at all, you probably realize that Call of Duty is not something I really care about or cover much, as I don't really cover a lot of dedicated first-person multiplayer shooter type games, but I wanted to mention this specifically because of just how bizarre the trailer for it was. Because if you didn't know it was a Call of Duty trailer, you'd likely be forgiven for assuming it was some sort of psychological survival horror type game, because that is definitely the vibe it actually gave, with all sorts of, reality-bending graphics, aesthetics, this sort of futuristic approach to a lot of things. It's just a very strange trailer, but Call of Duty Black Ops 7, I guess. There's that for you. As for today and this video, though, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Overall, I honestly thought this was a pretty strong show for Xbox. A lot of fun stuff going on, a lot of things I'm going to cover personally. In fact, here in a couple days, I'll kind of organize that and give people a rundown of what the next couple of months look like for me specifically, but otherwise, I'll have another video following up on the Outer Worlds 2 as they did a deep dive there, and that's definitely something I'm going to be covering later this year as well, and I'm very interested in what Obsidian is doing, so you can certainly expect that video probably later today if everything goes well, which is necessary if you're wondering, because today, the 9th, is also the kickoff of Steam's Next Fest, so just oodles and oodles of things to do here lately, but let me know about what you think about all of that down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.